Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So, let us start with our prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Umagyanatimirandhasya jnananjanachalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padagamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Shabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Pancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishnaya Prabhanata Swami Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Kam Karoti Vacharam Pangam Nabhyate Girib Yat Kripatamaham Mande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion on the Srimad Bhagavat, chapter 13 of the fourth canto. We are discussing on the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. We discussed the chapter roughly midway, and as the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj were being mentioned by Maitreya Muni Guruji, mentioned around 8 generations. And when he almost came to the end, he said that there was a great king Anga, who was the son of Ulmuka, one of the descendants of Dhruva, and his wife Pushkarini. He had 6 sons, out of which Anga became the king. And this king Anga, he married a lady by the name Sunita. And very briefly, he says that Anga actually prematurely left home, giving up his kingdom, giving up his family. He left everything and went home, disgusted with his son Vena's behavior. And very briefly, Maharaj, Maitreya Muni mentions that how Vena was eventually killed by the Brahmanas because of his notoriety, and how from his body, through the process of churning, a human being was created by the great sages, who actually was an incarnation of the Supreme Lord, and whose name is Prithu Maharaj. And he was the Adi Raja. He was the first systematic emperor of the world. If somebody asks you who's the first proper ruler of earth, properly administered earth through systems, through development of agriculture, commerce, setting up proper towns, villages, a proper administration. The first king in all history, the Bhagavatam mentions, is Prithu Maharaj. And we will be discussing in great detail about Prithu Maharaj. Many chapters are dedicated to him. He's a very extraordinary personality and very beautiful pastimes are there. But when this brief story or the high level outline of the story was mentioned, it was enough to trigger intense curiosity in the mind of Viduraji. This is suddenly very extraordinary. Oh, king suddenly left and went to forest. What happened? His son was notorious. What happened? And his son was killed by Brahmins. What happened? And from his body, the next king was produced. That is even more amazing. This is like, a kind of genetic engineering which the sages performed back in the ages of the year, because there was no contribution of Vena's wife in the process of producing this child. Of course, the Bhagavatam doesn't give that technology, because that is not the purpose of the Bhagavad. But it does mention that there was some special churning done from the thighs of Vena's body to produce. So all these details, all these key points triggered the curiosity of Vidura, who starts asking with great astonishment to Maitreya Muni, King Anga is actually such a great soul, such a great king, so pious. So I don't even understand how could such a, you're saying a very notorious son was born to him. How did such a thing happen? Why did he get such a bad son? Because generally we expect that if a person is saintly, then because he has good karma, generally he'll attract a good soul, a good child. And also, why would sages who are so saintly curse Vena? And Vena was the king, as per your mention. The king is not to be punished like this. I mean, especially not to be killed. I mean, he could have been punished, but he was actually killed. Because the king is the ruler, and if the king is destroyed, that can result in so much chaos in society. So why did the sages take such an extreme step? Please explain. Even if sometimes the king may have some undesirable traits in his character, if there is not a better person, then it is better to have a one-eyed king than no king. Why? Because if there is no king, the whole kingdom will go to ruination. Because the key point is, if there is no one that the rogues or the notorious elements in society are scared of, then they will create lot of havoc in society. And we see this all over the world, even today. Wherever there is a weak ruler or there is a government, even if it is a democracy which is weak and unable to take decisions or enforce their will, you see how so many notorious elements can do all kinds of things and get away with it. So please explain all this. You know everything, Maitreya Muni. You know the past and the future. And I am very faithful and I am very eager to hear this information, because this sounds like a very unique case in the history of the descendants of Dhruva. Can you please explain all this in detail? So Maitreya Muni is happy to oblige. Maitreya Muni starts explaining the story of King Anga, leading to the story of King Veda. So the story begins like this, that at one time, this King Anga, he had no children. Even though he wanted children, he didn't have. At one particular point, he was performing a great Ashwamedha Yajna. Ashwamedha Yajna is not something very easy to perform. So he was extraordinarily qualified, extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily rich. Yajnas like Ashwamedha, only multi-billionaires could perform those times. And those kings who have the power to subjugate the whole planet, only they can perform Ashwamedha Yajna. So he was of that standard. He had engaged the best of priests and he had all the rituals done wonderfully. But something very interesting happened. It is said that even when he was making various offerings into the fire as per the Vedic rituals by the Brahmanas and following all the rules and regulations, King Anga observed that the Devatas were not coming into the sacrifice to accept their offerings. Now, this is also very interesting. It is said in olden times, especially in Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, and even up to Dwapar Yuga to some extent, when properly qualified Brahmanas would perform yajnas, when the yajnas were performed properly, at the conclusion of the yajnas, the respective deities to whom the offerings were made, they would personally appear in the yajna, the devatas, and accept the offering. So that is actually certification. Yes, the yajna was done properly. So that is the success parameter. Up to Dwapar Yuga, it was working. In Kali Yuga, because nobody can perform the yajnas properly, ingredients are not pure, the Brahmanas don't know. The vast majority here is 99.999%. Don't know how to properly either do the rituals or chant the mantras, or they do not have the character or spiritual advancement to properly execute the yajnas. So the devatas do not come. That's in Kali Yuga, we just have to hope that everything went on well. Of course, this doesn't mean that the offerings do not reach the devatas. If indeed even in Kali Yuga the mantras are chanted properly with faith and the offerings are made into the fire, through the agency of the fire, offerings will still reach either the Lord or the devatas to whom those offerings are made. But that was the glory of the previous yugas, that the devatas would personally come, and in some cases, as we have discussed in some of the earlier past times, that the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his direct representative, some Vishnu Duta, would personally appear in the yajna fire to either accept the offerings or to grant the fruit of the yajna. Yes, for example, we discussed recently at Ram Navami how when Dashrath Maharaj performed through Rishya Shringa the Putra Kameshti Yajna, it said that a divine personality appeared from the fire with a payasam pot and gave it to the king. So I am the representative of the Supreme Lord, take this and distribute it to your prince. So Kali Yuga, we just have to hope that everything went well. That's why in Kali Yuga, because the quality of almost all aspects is so poor, there is not so much emphasis placed on the yajna process. But in previous yugas, it was different. Especially in Treta, even in Dwapar, yajnas were not so powerful. Treta, the yajnas were considered the main means of spiritual elevation. So when King Anga observed that the Devatas were not coming, and the Brahmanas also reported to the king that we do not know why, we have done all the rituals properly, we have done everything properly. Even though nothing we have done wrong, still, what is the expected result is not happening. The ingredients are proper, the mantras are chanted properly, the ceremony is being done properly, the faith is also there. If you recollect, in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we are talking about yajnas and sattvika yajnas, which are meant for the devatas of the Supreme Lord. Sattvic yajnas performed exactly as per scripture with transcendental faith. They say we have transcendental faith, we are performing it properly. Everything seems to be good, but we do not understand why the devatas seem to be keeping away from the yajna, or why they should feel insulted for some reason or neglected for some reason. So when this was informed to King Anga, he actually became very pained. How come after doing everything, devatas are not coming? So he was actually under a vow of silence because he was the Yajman, but that time he took a permission, special according to the certain ceremonial rituals, to break his silence. And then he inquired from certain other elevated Brahmins, some priests were there. And he asked them, please explain to me, what is the offense that I have committed? I am the Yajman, even though you are performing the Yajna on my behalf as a Ritvik, I am the Yajman. I am the sponsor of the Yajna. It is being done for me. So why is it that it is not working as expected? So the head of the priest explained, because they had that spiritual insight, they could see not just the obvious in terms of the rituals and the ceremonies, but they had the insight to see into the past of King Anga. So the head priest said that, O king, as far as your this lifetime is concerned, you are absolutely sinless. You have not done any mistake. There is no blemish on your character. Even in your mind, you don't perform sinful activities, nor have you been ever offensive. But in your previous life, there is some sinful activity which is still affecting you. And it is because of that sinful activity is affecting you, and that same sinful activity is what is causing you in this life to not have a son. And because of that sinful activity, the demigods are keeping away from you. So Anga became quite concerned. So he discussed with them that how can this particular situation be remedied? So the Brahmana suggested to him, my dear King Anga, why don't you do this? You don't have a son because of that sin, but we can counteract that deficit from your previous life by performing a very special yajna to the Supreme Lord and request him for a son. And if you perform that ritual properly, the Lord will grant you that son so that you can then, settle that karmic account. So this is one of the ways, right? I mean, if you don't have the karma, you don't have a karma to get something in this life, then either through a bona fide yajna, because for that karma, if you haven't performed the karma, you still have to pay. in a currency of punya merit to be able to get something. So either you can perform a yajna according to scripture, not your own concocted yajna. According to the scriptural injunctions for that particular desire that you have, what is the proper ritual, whom to propitiate, how to propitiate. One follows the system properly, one can be granted with that blessing. Sometimes there are yajnas, sometimes there are, for smaller things, there are sometimes some austerities also recommended. So there are various austerities either for the Supreme Lord or for the Devatas, where one either fasts or performs austerities. And generally, those who are materialistically minded people, they are generally attracted by this part of the Vedas. That's what the Bhagavad Gita says. Either to get material blessings here or in the hereafter. That is why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna that materialistic persons are bewildered by the flowery language of the Vedas. And that's why their intelligence is never fixed on the real goal of the Vedas, which is to attain the supreme destination. They become distracted. So, of course, for a devotee who's a great devotee of the Lord, he can actually directly please the Supreme Lord through devotional service. A devotee, especially those who are on the path of pure devotion, do not even take this path of yajna or austerity. They either accept the situation as a desire of the Lord, which is the best thing to do, or they will worship the Lord with great intensity to fulfill their desire. Akamo sarvakamo va mokshakam udaradhihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. So if any one of you suddenly got the idea based on what I said that, okay, I also want to find out what is the yajna, I also want to find out what is the tapasya, my humble suggestion is do not go into that direction. It is not necessary. As devotees, or at least as aspiring devotees, you should stick to worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's no strong need to get distracted unless there's a very, very specific purpose, and that is the guidance given. And the Supreme Lord is capable of fulfilling all desires. And the Gita Krishna says that even the blessings that the Devatas give is actually ultimately coming from the Supreme Lord himself. Mayaiva vehitan hitan. So net, as devotees, should just worship the Lord with great devotion, whether we have material desire or whether we want pure devotion. Hopefully we stick to pure devotion, but even if we have a material desire, we should worship. So the good thing about Anga is, he was performing the yajna, he was still doing devotional service because the performance of that yajna was for the Supreme Lord. And he was doing with love and devotion. He was a devotee himself. So it can be seen as a devotional service, and he did it for the Lord. And when he performed that yajna according to the guidance of the great sages, the Lord appeared along with all the Devatas. Now, this is also another interesting thing. He pleased the Supreme Lord and he performed the yajna. When Vishnu comes, the Devatas are his assistants. They cannot say, no, this, that. When the Prime Minister comes, the cabinet comes with him. So they do not have any individual choice. So all the Devatas appeared when the Supreme Lord appeared. So they pleased Lord Vishnu, the Lord appeared, and it is said, and all the Devatas appeared. And it is said also from the fire a blazing personality emerged, wearing a golden garland and a white dress. And he was carrying a golden pot which was filled with payasam. Now this payasam seems to be the most popular way of giving blessings. I do not know why particularly payasam, but of course rice which is cooked in milk and sugar is considered very auspicious. Even Krishna loves to eat sweet rice first thing in the morning, especially a little bit garnishing of saffron and some cardamom, maybe chipped almonds, cashews inside. It is heavenly, especially after it is offered to the Lord Mahaprasad. I was staying in Radha Gopinath temple. I used to have the morning sweet Mangal Bhog, sweet rice, out of the world. Anyway, so this divine personality gave that very beautiful golden pot of payasam. And the king was very happy that everything went well. He took the guidance of the Brahmanas and the milk pot was there. So, mission accomplished, or so he thought. He smelled that pot. Smelled in the sense that he accepted that mercy by smelling. Because he was not supposed to eat it. The offering was for his wife. So he smelled the pot. And then he gave it to his wife Sunita, who didn't have any son. Now, something interesting about the background of Sunita, even though we don't have time to go into the details, it is said Sunita was the daughter of Mrityu, death. So even though Anga was in the dynasty of the great Dhruva Maharaj, somehow his wife Sunita, her connection was from a irreligious background, Mrityu. You may recollect Mrityu and others are descendants of another line. We discussed that earlier. I don't want to go into that. Refer to the earlier chapters of that. Not in this canto. I think that discussion we had in the previous canto, third canto. So when Sunita accepted this sweet rice, and sure enough, according to the blessings of that pot of payasam coming from the Supreme Lord, it surely took effect. She became pregnant, and in due course of time, she gave birth to a son. And because that son was the grandson of Mrityu or death personified, and that boy, especially because he kept association of his grandfather. So probably the mother and the father were too busy, and the child was with the grandparents. And this sometimes happens with devotees also. Husband, wife are devotees, but the parents or grandparents may not be, and then the grandchildren are left with them. The grandchildren, the grandparents teach them different values, which may actually sometimes be opposed to the values of devotion. So this boy, whose name was Vena, grew up based on that association of Mrityu, and he became a very irreligious person. Not just to say that he was ordinarily irreligious or sinful, was absolutely notorious. So some examples are given of his notoriety. He said he would just, even as a young boy, go into the forest, take a bow and arrow and just whimsically kill animals. Innocent deer he would kill. So it's very cruel. So as soon as he would come to any place, people would run away saying, "Oh, here comes the cruel Vena." And that was the least of his sinful activities. It is said when this boy Vena would play with his other friends, sometimes he would get into quarrel with some of the friends. And it is said when he would get into quarrel, he would straight away kill his friends. Can you imagine? Sometimes, like children, they fight after a game or something. At our time, all we would do is at the most we will fist punch each other or say, I will not talk to you. You would just kill the other friend. And nobody could do anything because he was the prince. It is said he would kill them as if they were animals for slaughter. King Veda became very concerned. What is this that he is doing? And he punished him. It was not that Anga did not do anything. Anga tried to reform him. He punished him. But no matter what Anga did, Vena wouldn't improve in his ways. He became very, very disturbed. Now, this is also something very interesting. The king, when all this was happening, started thinking in his own mind. Started thinking that originally I didn't have a son, so I was sad. Then I wanted a son, so I did so many things to get a son. Now I realize it was better to not have a son rather than have a son like this. This is oftentimes the realization. Sometimes, man proposes, God disposes. We make so many plans. We think if I do this and this and this and this, then I will become happy. Sometimes what we do to become happy actually becomes the cause of our misery rather than become the cause of our happiness. Then we think, oh, I would have better, it would have been better if I had not done this. Because the suffering of a bad son is even worse. It's a headache. No, I mean, can you imagine? He doesn't know whenever his son is playing around who he will kill today. Can you imagine the anxiety for the king? Suddenly burn somebody's house. He'll suddenly chop off the head of one of his school friends. That is the kind of things he does on a daily basis. And he starts thinking, yes, a sinful son actually practically causes all one's good reputation to be destroyed. And all these kind of sinful activities actually become the cause of such great inconvenience, such great disturbance. Which intelligent person will want a son like this? Such a son is just a bond of illusion. And it makes one's home life miserable. And then the king started thinking, actually, I'm thinking like this. But actually, let me look at the bright side of this situation. See, now a spiritualist, what is the difference between a materialistic person and a spiritual person? Of course, a material person, a spiritual personality also, when he is faced with a lot of challenging situations in life, he may also to some extent feel the pain, the frustration, like King Anga mentioned. But because they have faith and because they understand that everything happens for a purpose, he also tried to reflect on the whole situation in a positive way. And this is something which is very important. As devotees, it is always our duty to try to find the silver lining on the cloud. What does that mean? It means that whatever situation Krishna puts into our life, even those situations which we see as misery, a devotee doesn't simply see it as a punishment. Yes, the dimension of punishment is there. But because the individual is a devotee and sincerely trying to serve the Lord, he knows that if the Lord is allowing that sinful reaction to come, there must be some good learning or some spiritual progress that particular karma is going to propel me towards. So as King Anga was reflecting, he started thinking, Actually, what I was saying earlier is not fully correct. Actually, a bad son is better than a good son. You start saying, thinking exactly the opposite. Why? Because if you have a good son, there is a good chance that it may create a lot of attachment to materialistic way of life. One may become more attached to family life. Whereas if somebody has a bad son, then he'll be so frustrated that he will no longer have any interest in continuing with a materialistic household. The home itself will become so hellish that very easily one can become detached. It's a very interesting thought which started coming to the mind of. And this was actually a very wonderful realization. Because the Acharyas explain that in the case of King Anga, just look at his situation. He pleased the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Lord gave him payasam. Of course, through that personality who appeared in the fire. And you may think as a devotee, he did something wonderful and he got payasam. How come it led to a miserable situation? Because generally the Lord will not do something which will put the devotee into misfortune. Is it not? That is why it is said one should approach always the Supreme Lord, because the Supreme Lord never gives misfortune. Just discussed earlier, Rakamo, Sarvakamo, Va, Mokshakamo, Daradi, Ivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajita Pursham. Worship the Supreme Lord, because one can be very confident that the Supreme Lord will give a blessing in a way that will be auspicious for us. But the important thing is to understand, and this is auspicious doesn't mean pleasurable at a material level. That is the misinterpretation that practicing devotees often do. Think God's blessing means it will do good for me, means it will be a pleasurable situation. It will be wonderful success, happy, merry, all wonderful. But Krishna looks at it from a very different situation. Krishna looks at it from the perspective of what is it that this particular soul needs at this point in time in his particular situation to transition to the next higher stage of spiritual evolution. And if that means giving him wealth, making him successful, Krishna will do that. And if it means putting the devotee into an apparently externally challenging situation, frustrating situation, miserable situation, so that the devotee through deeper reflection comes to the realization that this is not the path that I should attach myself to. Because one of the most important lessons we as practicing sadhakas, especially as conditioned souls who are trying to purify ourselves, one of the most important learnings for us is to understand the futility of material existence. Because if we do not realize the futility of material existence, we cannot full-heartedly take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of God. That is a fact. So it's not that the Lord has to do it like this, but unfortunately, without being pushed into a corner, most conditioned souls in their comfort zones do not take shelter of the Supreme Personality. And that is the reality. For most of us, whether you accept it or not, that is the reality. But that doesn't mean that the Lord always does that to every person in every situation. But this was the Lord's intent. The Lord especially arranged for a great soul like Anga, a wife like Sunita, who was the daughter of Mrityu, and arranged for a son like Veena, so that he will be so detached through that frustration, so detached from material life, that he will focus exclusively on the Supreme Personality. Now, those who are not devotees, if Krishna does something like that to them, what they will do? They will actually become faithless and give up all faith in God and become even more demoniac. So it's not that this trick works on everybody all the time. Those who are spiritually a bit evolved, they are quite attached to the Lord and are serious about spiritual advancement, but still they are maintaining some attachment which is holding them back. Sometimes Krishna will use this trick, not always. Sometimes he uses. Even Srila Prabhupada said, even in his own family life, situations came about such that his wife and children were not very supportive of his mission in Krishna consciousness. I don't want to go into those details for this conversation because that's a long story. Please read Prabhupada's Leelamrut. It's a very interesting story. And how eventually all those situations, including the failing of Prabhupada's business, which was at one time flourishing. Prabhupada had a very flourishing pharmacy business. And then his business collapsed. His wife was not cooperating with him. In fact, she at one time went to the extent of selling Prabhupada's Bhagavatam so that she could buy some tea biscuits. So after all that situation, Prabhupada said, oh, this is not conducive for my spiritual. Of course, Prabhupada, being a very advanced soul, was not trying to look for material happiness in that situation, but those situations made him realize that, continuing in this situation is not going to help my ultimate cause. He decided that. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came in his dream and said, you take sannyas. So Krishna created all that situation, and later Srila Prabhupada in retrospect, he commented that Krishna arranged all of that so that I could become detached. And I could focus exclusively on the service. So something similar happened in the life of Maharaj. So even though from one perspective one may think that, oh, this was a pain, this was because of his past sin, this, that, may argue all this at an external level. But at a more deeper level, one must understand that all that happened was because of the higher arrangement of the Supreme Lord. And sure enough, because of his proper faith and because of the proper association he had, Anga could properly reflect when all these things happened in his life. Because if one is in proper consciousness, when one is pushed into such a situation, he takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He sees what is the direction his life has to take. So as King Anga was thinking like this, King Anga, it is said, that particular night he could not even sleep. And as he was reflecting, he became so detached, the little bit of attachment that he had for family, that also evaporated in the fire of his intense realization and detachment. And it is said one day, in the dead of the night, he just got up from his bed. He left Vena and his mother, who were sleeping nearby. They were deep asleep, and he just walked out of the kingdom and went into the forest without informing anybody. Did not write any departure letter. He neither had a farewell party, nothing. So be it. The ministers and the Brahmanas will take care of what to do next. This is clear signal from the Supreme Lord. My job is done. I need to go. So he gave up his home and opulence and proceeded to the forest. Very interesting. The Shastras say that a devotee son, a devotee child, is actually a very great blessing. So obviously, I mean, it is not just because we have this pastime that means that, oh, we should all pray, oh, let me also have a child like Veena, then I'll be detached. It's not necessary. It's not necessary that the same trick will necessarily work for everyone. So we should not try to pray to the Lord to give misery so that we surrender to Him. That the Lord will do. That we don't have to pray. Lord will know our level and will do whatever is. Of course, it is best and it is the duty of the parents to try to train their children that they become sincere devotees of the Supreme Personality of God. And the purpose of having Krishna conscious children is not just the fulfillment of family life, but the word putra, the child, the son is known as putra. Pu stands for sin and tra stands for trayate. He who delivers his ancestors, his father and his other ancestors from a sinful situation is known as a putra. So putra is one who by virtue of his spiritual advancement delivers his ancestors, if at all they are caught up with some sinful karma. And that is why the Bhagavatam says that if a person becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, he not only delivers himself, but he also delivers his previous generations. A pure devotee delivers 21 generations, 10 up, 10 down, and one of his own. That is the power of a pure devotee, Mahabhagavad. If a person becomes a Madhyama Adhikari devotee, which means he has reached to the level of strong nishtha, then he delivers from all sins and contamination. 7 generations, 3 up, 3 down, and one of his own. And if one is a Kanishta Adhikari who has sincere faith, takes initiation and practices devotional service, he delivers 3 generations, 1 up, 1 down, and his own. That is the potency of pure devotional service, even at a Kanishta platform. So, of course, it is always our duty to train, to first become devotees ourselves and to do all possible efforts to make our children devotees. That is the perfect thing to do. But it is possible by higher arrangement of the Lord, like in the case of Angad, in spite of all good effort, that did not happen as the outcome. And in Angad's case, it actually worked well. So a good child, a good son is known as Putra because he, through his devotion, through his spiritual evolution, is able to deliver the father and the ancestors. And that is why the scriptures say that if one son does not become qualified enough to be able to deliver his ancestors, then such a son or a child doesn't, putra and putri, son or daughter, doesn't, such a progeny doesn't qualify to be called as a putra because they are unable to deliver. Then what are they called? The scriptures say they should be called mutra. For those of you who do not understand the language, putra is a son and mutra is urine. The Shastras say a putra or a son who is not qualified to deliver his ancestors is as good as a mutra. Why? It's like urine. Why? Because a putra as well as mutra come from the same place. Physically, from the organ of the man, both the putra and the mutra come. So either a child is a worthy putra or he's as good as Mutra. This is the scriptural opinion. Please forgive me if don't feel offended. This is not my commentary. Just telling what Shastra says. So in the case of King Anga, that is what happened. Putra was like Mutra. And he got so disgusted because of that. But of course, the endeavor of all parents is to try to make their children as great devotees. Of course, in some cases, in spite of the best efforts, sometimes devotees, the children may or may not become devotees, because children may also have their own karmic background. The parents themselves will have their own karmic background. So it is quite a complicated thing. But at least as parents, we should make all possible effort to make the necessary effort to produce worthy children. And we want that so that generations of Vaishnavas are produced and the whole earth becomes pure. Because even one sincere devotee on this planet makes a huge difference to the overall consciousness of the planet. That is the fact. So this is what happened with Anga, and he went and he left. And next day morning, everybody wakes up in the kingdom to find that the king has disappeared. No idea where he has went. Of course, they all understood that this is whatever would have happened because they had some idea what was going on in his mind. They all became very disturbed. In fact, they made all possible efforts to search for him. Practically all over the world, because the resources of the kingdom are not small. But the king was very smart. He knew where to hide so that he cannot be found. It is said, just like a less experienced yogi tries to search for the super soul but cannot find him, the citizens tried to find for King Anga but couldn't find him. So when after all efforts they couldn't find him anywhere, they were very disappointed. They all came back to the kingdom, and all the great sages and the learned elders, they got together. They were discussing what to do. And they informed everybody else that they couldn't find. So this is where this particular chapter ends. This is chapter 13. So the next chapter, which is the story of King Vena, chapter 14, is where King Vena was, because of no other better choice at that point in time, appointed as the king. And then his story unfolds. How he lived, what happened with him, how it led to the appearance of King Trishul. So that beautiful, very interesting story we will discuss in our next session. So I will end here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Shri Prabhupada. So I'm opening up the floor. Any questions or comments? So before you have, yeah, Prabhu, just 1 second. I'd like to welcome some devotees. Prashantji has come back after an India tour. Prashantji, welcome back to the class and after your India trip. Haribo.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you.
Hari, hope you are in good health, you and Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, everything is fine. We had a very good time, especially my visit to the temple at Chowpatty in Mumbai on the Ram Navami festival day.
Haribo.
Where, as I already shared the photo,
yeah,
I met Upendra Prabhu, your father-in-law over there.
Yeah. Nice. He was also very happy. I shared the picture with him also later. He also mentioned to me that he met up.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah, thank you. It is always nice to be in India and so many holy places.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Wonderful, Prabhu. Sorry. So, Sudhir Sundar Prabhu, you have a question. Please go ahead. Sudhir Sundar Prabhu?
Yes, yes. Okay, Prabhu. Sorry, I was mute. So I just wanted to make a point that what is it shared earlier, that for devotee, as far as we are concerned, I mean, based on the time, place, and what is that circumstances, sometimes the Lord might be in some cases put us in certain challenges, while in what cases we could see that there are benediction which is given to us. So at the end of the day, as an practicing devotees, we should just surrender to the Lord, and what accept whatever comes in our way, because sometimes it's going to be very, very difficult. Like for example, we might plan something, but then end of the day, there are things which kind of could be completely different. So I think that's the point I just wanted to share, because at the end of the day, many things are beyond our control. So one way is just to surrender the Lord, as you always say, that he will be the judge to decide that whether that thing is supposed to be good for us, or it could be otherwise. I just wanted to point out the things.
Yeah. So I want to state one thing, because this particular point needs to be understood very clearly. So I want to quote 2.47. Karmanyevadikaraste ma phalechu kadachana ma karma phala heturvu ma te sangostva karmani. So detachment or accepting the will of the Lord doesn't mean lethargy in performing our duty. Because sometimes there is a tendency in us sometimes, and I'm not saying you are suggesting this, Prabhu, I'm just making a general point. The tendency sometimes is we do not do our part and we say this is God's wish. So the spirit of that surrender is that in spite of our best effort, if things do not, we must use our best intelligence, we must use our best effort. In spite of that, if things don't go, we are detached from the result, we accept the result as the way the Lord gives to us. But we cannot say that, oh, if I did not do my part, for example, if we do not do our part to train our children properly and they go in bad association and they turn out to be maybe not as bad as Veena, but that was a very exceptional situation, but notorious in some way. Then we cannot just say, oh, that was the desire of the Lord and this is what is good for me. No, not in that sense. Of course, everything is good in the sense that it will teach us a lesson. But we have to be a bit careful in how we approach this. This should not be done in a spirit of the mentality of laziness towards performing our duties. So, it's like, somebody who has a job, doesn't do their job roles and responsibilities properly, gets fired, and then says it was the Lord's desire that I get fired. It's for my spiritual advancement. It is not like that, because then that is your responsibility. So many times in our life, there are situations where the result could have indeed been much better if we had put in the right effort. And a vast majority of situations in life are like that. And that is why Purushartha has its value. We are not fatalistic in the sense that whatever is happening, is we have to understand whatever happens is a function of both our endeavor and the Lord's sanction. So both aspects are there. And it's not that the Lord will just give something independent of our effort. No, our effort also has its contribution. So we just have to be a bit cautious that we do not become over eager to just underperform on our side and label the outcome as Krishna's explicit desire. Of course, everything will happen by Krishna's desire. Even the failure in that case also happens, but that doesn't mean that was Krishna's specific intent for you. You understand? Right? I'm just sharing this with everybody. So, yeah, Sudhir Sundar Prabhu. Yeah, does it make sense? I just wanted to.
Yes, Prabhu, that point you kind of made is kind of put it in the right
Correct.
perspective.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just adding that
Thanks.
that perspective is important.
Thanks,
Because
Prabhu.
more often than not, and I've seen this in the lives of many sadhakas, we all make this mistake. Many times we do not do our best and we say, or we don't show proper sincerity or seriousness in various ways. And then we just say that the situation that is there in my life now is just the will of God. That is why. No, it could have been much better if you had put in the right effort. So that's something that we have to be very cognizant of. So putting right effort. So this whole understanding is that our culture is fatalistic. That anyways everything will happen the way it is exactly designed. That is not our philosophy. There is ample space for us to act. Yes, if there are big blocking karmas, then yes, then the results will not be commensurate with our actions. But that we wouldn't know anyways. So we have to put our best effort in any case. And then whatever comes after our best effort, we just accept it as the will of the Lord. We try to see in the calamities that come. And of course, sometimes even the calamities that come because of our wrong actions or underperformance, there also there is a lesson from God. It's not that there is not a lesson. That lesson is there because every reaction there is a lesson. But only that it's not that God necessarily upfront wanted it to be like that. And always in all situations and all miseries, one should always try to look for what is the lesson for me in this particular situation. That is very important. So when as sadhakas, we always look for that silver lining of what is it that Krishna is trying to teach me. And usually, more often than not, the bottom line of what Krishna wants to teach us is to realize the futility of material existence and material enjoyment and to sincerely take shelter of Him. This is usually the bottom line, even though it may come in various shapes and forms. Usually it is that. So, yeah, we just need to balance this. And if we always keep that positive perspective, then we can make actually very nice spiritual progress. But if we are whimsical, then we will actually go through a lot of hard knocks in life unnecessarily, which we could have avoided. So sometimes the reason why we are ourselves in that situation, much of it is to do with ourselves. So for example, in Prabhupada's case, it was not Prabhupada's karma which created that situation. Or Prabhupada's lack of performing his duty properly that created the situation. But Krishna purposely did that because he wanted to push Prabhupada into a particular direction because he had a great mission to fulfill. So those are very extraordinary circumstances. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay, if nothing else, we will conclude here. Okay, I was just thinking tomorrow I have something else also. So tomorrow we'll skip the sadhana class. We will have it on the following Sunday, if you are all okay.
Okay, Prabhu.
Okay. So thank you all very much. So we have concluded chapter 13. We will start next time from chapter 14. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Suresh Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhuji, Pranam.
Anita ji, Pranam, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Suraj, you are on the way to Bangalore.
Prabhuji,
Yes, Meera,
another
Hare
45
Hare
minutes.
Krishna.
We are listening class.
Yes, that's what I told you. All you have to do is, but you good, you connected on Zoom.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is showing your eagerness. See, Anita Mataji was also in the car. She's also eager to hear. So where there is a will, there is always a way.
Yes.
So Krishna always, those who are eager to hear about Krishna, Krishna is very pleased. Krishna is eager to see our eagerness hearing. And just to be very clear, this is not about me or listening to my class. It's about our eagerness to hear about him. It can be manifest to any bona fide devotee's katha. But the point is our eagerness. When we are very eager in spite of all challenges and we find a way, then that intention to want to connect to Krishna is what actually pleases Krishna. It's not the ritual, it is not the austerity, it is not the external things. Those are okay, those are helpful, but ultimately what Krishna sees is our eagerness. So this is always very important. So all of us should keep that in mind to try to show our eagerness to hear and chant. Thank you. So Suraj, have a good time with your family.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Prabhuji. Shalini is the primary driver. I am in passenger seat.
Oh, she's driving the car.
Yeah,
Oh,
she
yeah,
is
yeah,
the
yeah,
main.
of course. Oh, yeah, yeah, she's on this side. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, like that. Okay, Haribol, very nice. Take care, take care. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you all very much. I will see you soon. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prashant ji, Sridhar ji, Shraddha ji,
Prabhuji.
Archana, Leela Mataji. Thank you. Bhaskar, Amit Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Anand Sundari Mataji, thank you. Sapna ji, Shraddha ji, and Sini ji, and Rishikesh, who's behind the scenes.
Krishna, Prabhuji. Yeah, I just went.
He's behind the virtual background.
Yeah. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much.